Welcome everyone to the 2023 CINR webinar. This morning, we're going to start with the work scope on topic area 4, modeling and simulation. But before we begin on that, we would like to remind participants that the overviews you are going to hear during this session are intended to introduce the topic area and subtopical areas, provide context about the types of ongoing work that is happening in the Office of Nuclear Energy's programs in relevant technical areas, and provide guidance on areas that are clearly outside of the NE mission space. The presentations and Q&A are intended to inform the applicants that they may choose to submit to this funding opportunity, not constrained to those ideas only to only those being pursued by the programs. With that, I just wanted to let you know that the Q&A will be at the end of the final presentation on modeling and simulation. And you can type your questions into the Q&A feature on the GoToWebinar application at any time during the presentations. With that, we'll turn that time over to our first presenter, which is Dave Henderson with Modeling and Simulation Scopes. Go ahead, Dave, when you're ready.
Hi, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me all right. Welcome, everyone. So I will be presenting topic area 4, modeling and simulation. My name is David Henderson. I'm the program manager for the Nuclear Energy Advanced Modeling and Simulation program. But I would note that, as you've heard several times over the last 2 days, this topic area is not specific to that program, but to the broader area of modeling and simulation, particularly tool development. We have 3 subtopics in this area. First one, multi-scale modeling. Second, verification validation and uncertainty quantification. And the third one being a catch-all like the other topics have. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so just an overview of this area and context. In general, the importance of modeling and simulation tools is growing, and we have a need for science-based, verified, and validated modeling and simulation capabilities to facilitate the design, implementation, and operation of nuclear energy systems. This whole topic area is particularly focused on the development and improvement of the tools and improvement of frameworks for many different modeling and simulation activities. We've listed a few of them here as examples, just in high fidelity reactor modeling, particularly neutronics, structural dynamics, thermal hydraulics, multi-scale, multi-physics models, particularly for catching the different phenomena that interact with each other in modeling a complex system. As mentioned in the subtopics, verification and validation and uncertainty quantification. We also highlighted flow modeling, but this is a very open scope. Again, not specific to the NEAMS program, but hopefully in your proposals would be heavily informed by that work. So let's go to the next slide. Just a bit of context on NE's modeling and simulation program. We refer to that as NEAMS. If you look at budget documents, it's referred to by Congress by the Joint Modeling and Simulation Program. This program came out of 2, we'll call it predecessor programs. The NEAMS program has existed for about 12 years. There was also a energy innovation hub that was focused on light water reactor modeling and simulation. That was also referred to as the CASTLE program. But as that hub ended, we did not want to be continue to be specific to non-light water reactors in the NEAMS program. So we made sure that we reevaluated the program and looked at the existing gaps and priorities for both light water reactors and non-light water reactors. So the NEAMS program now includes all reactor types, essentially. We are trying to develop and deploy predictive computer methods, either for design analysis and safety evaluation. We have a close collaboration with the NRC, who has already adopted some of our tools and provides inputs to us on the gaps that they see, their needs, and we get similar information from industry and the other nuclear energy R&D programs that you've heard about the rest of this week through this webinar. That interaction with those stakeholders is essential because we are trying to develop tools that meet needs that they have. So we need to hear from them on what the needs are, how the tools are working, and that sort of thing to make sure we're scratching that itch. But also we need those other programs and stakeholders providing data, as particularly validation data, that we can make sure that the tools are actually modeling the phenomena accurately. So in this graphic in the middle, you see some different, what we've called core competencies, but different aspects of nuclear system modeling. You have some code names at the bottom: Bison, Grizzly, Yellow Jacket, Griffin, all of those in each of those areas. And so that gives you an idea of tools that we're actively developing and incorporating into the program. But ultimately, so there's many ways to measure success, but in our program, we've tried to define it fairly broadly, such that it's not as important to me that an industry player or the NRC or another stakeholder uses our specific code and that we get credit in that way, but it's much more important to me that the models that we have in the codes, the techniques and the methods that we employ are useful, and whether that's in the stakeholder's own code or using one of our codes, either one is a success if it's helping them accomplish their objectives and the overall objective of deployment and continued operation of the existing fleet. So next slide. So again, all of that is just context for work that is going on and has gone on in the past in the NEAMS program, the CASTLE program, and other programs, predecessors and related activities. This first topic, subtopic within topic area 4 is multi-scale modeling. And basically this is a very, very broad scope. We've tried to make it so that folks will looking to propose work in the modeling and simulation area are able to propose new and innovative topics and ideas, but particularly looking at how do we bridge the different scales and try to get mechanistic-based, phenomena-based modeling tools that take into account what's going on at lower length scales, but those are often slow-running codes, and then feed that information, that intelligence, let's say, into a faster-running engineering scale code, ultimately that can be coupled. So you're getting the interplay between the different phenomena that in the past might have been modeled separately and translated between codes, or done in a multi-physics way, but not as effectively or as efficiently. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. We're not particularly looking for new frameworks to be developed. There are plenty out there. If you want to propose something under this area along those lines, it's going to be a pretty high hurdle because there is so much out there between open source and other frameworks. There is so much work to do on accurately modeling the phenomena and fuels and fluids and materials and everything else that we feel like that's where the investment is better served. So that's what this subtopic is really about. Similar to the disclaimer just before my presentation, I would say please pay attention to the way these different scopes, the subtopics, and the overall topic area read, the specific text when these get finalized, because these are likely to change, in my opinion, at least to a minor degree. So pay close attention. One of the things I saw as I was reading through the different topic areas, there are modeling and simulation references and even scope within different subtopics. And I want to say in topic area 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 at least. So I'm working with the other federal staff who's in charge of any of those areas to try to deconflict. I would say topics under this area should be more about tool development, capability development, whereas in those other topics, more application of those tools to that specific need. So again, this will be something that we may try to refine for the final scopes, but that's how I would differentiate what gets done in this topic and subtopic area, as opposed to the modeling aspects of some of the other topic areas. Next slide. So here we note some relevant work similar to the other work scopes. It's incredibly difficult in this case to capture all of the relevant work in modeling and simulation. We have a $30 million program, $30 million per year, looking at every reactor type that Nuclear Energy Office at DOE is working on. So I have a smattering of some things here, note some frameworks that we've got that we're utilizing. There are other open source ones out there, as I mentioned. We've funded topics in automated meshing, automated optimization approaches. That was a NEOP scope last year. Multi-scale thermal hydraulics. We awarded a big integrated research project 2 years ago. Similarly, one on multi-physics TRISO performance. And those are specific IRPs, but we have an entire technical area devoted to each of those two broader topics of fuel performance and thermal hydraulics. Similarly, uranium dioxide fragmentation, relocation to dispersion. This is becoming a very hot topic for industry and DOE, looking at accident tolerant fuels and higher burnups. We have an activity with EPRI on that and interact with the fuel cycle group and NE. We had a SIDAC project specifically looking at fission gas modeling, and we're doing quite a bit within means leveraging that and apart from that work. Molten salt chemistry and corrosion. We just awarded in late June, I think it was, an integrated research project on that. We announced earlier this week a SIDAC project aimed at this, and SIDAC is a collaboration between the Office of Nuclear Energy and the Office of Science. So it is more cutting edge and science as opposed to the more applied things that we would typically do within this program. But that'll be an important thing to watch as things come out. That SIDAC is more on material side. The IRP that was awarded earlier this year is more on the coolant salt chemistry and what's going on there. We have any program related to nuclear energy is going to have transport, right? So there's been a lot of work in this area. I highly encourage you to make sure you are aware of all the work that we've been doing and others have been doing, and clearly it applies to any of these scopes, but especially in this area because it's the bread and butter of nuclear engineering departments. Transport has been done. It needs to be really clear what the benefit is of work proposed on that kind of topic. And we've also funded some NEOPs in particular and have other program work on how different species in the coolant of a system flow and deposit and things like that throughout the system. And our system code, SAM, is where we try to focus most of that work. So again, can't possibly cover all of the activities that we've done. So I've tried to highlight in some areas where some major work is done in parentheses, and down below on this slide, you see some web addresses for the NEAM website, the technical areas there, the CIDAC website, which at the moment only has the previous CIDAC project on fission gas modeling, but in the near future should have information on the new molten salt reactor materials side of things, that new project, and then the NEOP website, obviously. So next slide. Non-relevant work, I tried to limit this, again, trying to leave this subtopic and the whole topic area pretty wide open, but I did want to note development or purchase of high performance computing hardware is not what this topic is about. There's other places for that, either within NEOP or other DOE programs. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, this is one of those areas that I mentioned is in a couple of other topics, actually, RDO5 and IC3. So I would lean toward having anything that fits those scopes that's related to artificial intelligence and machine learning, particularly applied to development operation, needs to be under those scopes. If you have a question about something that doesn't fit well under one of those we can talk, but that is really the artificial intelligence and machine learning scopes. I think IC3 in particular is more of a catch-all. Modeling specific to fuel separation processes, that's more in the fuel cycle area, which is topic area 2. Again, trying to deconflict between what's in this topic area 4 and what's in other areas. Then we have a number of other more general kind of notes here about topics not relevant. So it's exclusively for non-proliferation purposes, or nuclear fusion applications, or nuclear weapons, or isotope production, medicine-related technologies. All of those things are handled by other offices. As noted in other presentations the last 2 days, if it's something that's useful to one of those, but it's really aimed at NE's mission, make that clear. We're not going to dismiss something purely because it might apply to one of these other areas. If it's really tailored toward a nuclear energy, nuclear power mission and objective and gap, make that clear, and it'll apply just fine. Okay, so next slide. So the other subtopic in this area, as I mentioned, is verification and validation and uncertainty quantification. There's a real need for being able to accurately quantify the uncertainty that you have in your final results. If we're going to make use of these advanced computing, high fidelity modeling and simulation tools based more on the science and building up, and less reliant on empirical data from experiments, which are very expensive to produce, then we've got to make sure that we can show that the tool does what it says it's going to do, that it accurately predicts the behavior it's supposed to in whatever system, and that we know what the uncertainties are. So this is a second subtopic within the modeling simulation area aimed at that sort of issue. I particularly would be interested in seeing validation cases, validation of our tools that we've been using applied to specific reactor concepts, but that's not the limit of this topic area, but that is something that we've identified would be very useful. Another one is how to translate uncertainty across different link scales, from lower link scale to engineering link scales. That's of particular interest and help, and would really help the NEAMS program in particular. I would say uncertainty quantification can become kind of what I would call a self-licking ice cream cone, or a black hole for research without a clear outcome, where it makes clear how big of a problem there is, but without really helping the situation much, or getting mired in higher math techniques. But we really need uncertainty quantification work that helps quantify, gives us comfort that the high fidelity tools are bounded and can be trusted, particularly for safety analysis, is an important outcome here. So we're specifically seeking proposals for development of novel methodologies and approaches for software verification, validation, and establishing uncertainties for these different high fidelity multiphysics codes. And so it can be for single physics codes or multiphysics codes, either one. Let's go to the next slide. Again, this topic is so broad that it was difficult to really come up with a list of relevant work in large enough buckets to make sense. There's a few here that I noted that are all ongoing or past work, particularly under the SBIR STTR program, previous NEOPS and the industry FOA, if you're familiar with that. I noted visualization and output analytics. We've had a NEOP scope for quite some time, one on benchmarking and code validation, and one on nuclear data. So there's a lot of ongoing work there, and the NEOP scopes and the NEA, Nuclear Energy Agency, the international organization, does a lot of benchmarking and capture of nuclear data, as does, for nuclear data, the Office of Science also coordinates a nuclear data program. And then there was a lot of work on VMV and UQ approaches and workflow under the Nuclear Innovation Hub, the CASTLE program. Highly recommend that you look at the work that they did and the papers that they put out. Again, we're, at least within the NEAMS program, we're trying to be more tailored to the particular codes and quantifying the uncertainty, of each code, and then translating that, as opposed to having a kind of a work in large methods for more general V&V and UQ. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, but some work I wanted to point you to. I would say, particularly, I found it difficult putting myself in your shoes and trying to find all of the SBIR work that we've funded in the past. It can be a bit difficult to get to other than manually going and searching through each year's awarded projects. If you want information on that, I can definitely give you a list separately if you'll email me or reach out through the technical integration office after this webinar. Okay, next slide. So again, very general, non-relevant work. I would say the ones in the subtopic MS2 apply to. So not looking for non-proliferation, fusion, nuclear weapons, medical isotope stuff here. But otherwise, the scope will say what the scope says, and if you're proposing something relevant, I'm sure it'll be considered. So next slide. So like all the other topics, I think this is just a last catch-all if you want to propose work that fits under the larger topic area of modeling and simulation, but doesn't fit neatly under subtopic 1 or 2. This is a place for you to propose that work, and you've probably heard the NE mission needs and goals identified here at the bottom of the slide. So make sure in all of your proposals that you're speaking to how the proposed work very clearly fills a gap, demonstrate your knowledge of what's out there. Make sure you show that you've done your homework. If you would like a list of technical points of contact within the NEAMS program, not as the technical points of contact for this scope necessarily, because I don't even know if we'll have those. But if you want to talk to someone within the program who has a very good grasp of what the NEAMS program and other modeling and simulation work that's been done, over time in a topic area like thermal hydraulics or fuels or whatever, I can provide you points of contact to talk to just to help you understand what's going on. But I want to make sure that you've done your homework and that these are tailored questions as opposed to please educate me on this general topic. So with that caveat, very helpful. I'm very happy to help you find some folks who can point you to resources and things like that. So I think that's my last slide, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Hi, Dave. We do have a number of questions. And for the audience, if you do have a question, please feel free to type it into the control panel under the question section, and we can read the questions live right here. So the first question I have is for M&S1. Will predictive framework development for multi-scale be of interest? And this is considering tool and capabilities development for coupled systems.
So in general, yes. I mean, as I said, this is a very broad, at least at this point, a very broad statement of work. And as I mentioned before, I think in doing so, you need to very clearly address why any of these other frameworks that exist are inadequate and how this one is going to solve it so well.
Okay, another question for that first work scope, M&S1. Does the M&S1 call encourage use of existing DOE NE code suites, the NEAMS suite, for the proposal, or any validated commercial, or will any validated commercial software be okay?
I think I heard a similar question in one of the other subtopics, so that's interesting. But in a word, yes. to both. um, the question I appreciate because it reminds me of something I was going to say during the presentation. But I am very happy to involve anyone who proposes relevant work, work that's relevant to the NEAMS program specifically. We'd be happy to involve those folks in the program to whatever degree that they're willing. Sometimes we get recipients who, they propose the work, they've got the funds, and they kind of want to go off and do their own thing. That's allowed. But for those who really want to contribute to the work that we're doing within the program and become an integrated part of it, yes, proposing work on tools that we're using or work where there's a very clear path to improve the tools that we're using would be great. That's very helpful. But this is a broad scope. If folks want to use other tools, it's allowed. I will be, from the NEAMS perspective, looking at whether or not we can incorporate that work and the outcomes from that work. But yeah, again, it's a very broad scope. So any of that would be allowed, at least at this point.
Dave, that addresses several questions that actually came in regarding
Well,
the
that's
same
good.
topic. Yeah. So moving further down the list. For MNS1, would you please provide more specific examples of multi-scale modeling that may be relevant to these work scopes? Should it be multi-scale?
I don't think the way that the scope is currently written that it has to be. It was more of use of multi-scale in this case as the top subtopic area. I would say was more to differentiate from just general multi-physics because that was too generic of a term. So read the scope, and the scope says and will say what it says. I don't think currently it's specific to multi-scale, but where everyone is going right now of trying to make use of more limited data so that you have to do less expensive experiments to validate your tools and your design and demonstrate that you're within safety bounds, safety criteria. Making use of the knowledge of lower link scale behaviors and how that translates to the engineering scale is where most of the work that I've seen lately is. But I don't think this scope at this point is exclusive to multi-scale specifically.
Thanks, Dave. The next question, will it be okay if some experimental validation works are proposed as well? If so, is there a limit for the fraction, for example, 30 or 50% of the proposed work?
It's a good question, particularly based on those kinds of specifics that we had in previous years. I am not aware of any requirement to that effect as far as a fraction of experimentation. I would say similar to answers yesterday, I think on fuels and the reactor development area. I think it's up to the applicant to pick the subtopic that best fits the topic area and the subtopic that best fits the work that you're proposing. And this one being around, again, capability development, tool development. But within that, I I think experimental validation is very useful and even encouraged. And if it is something that I'm overseeing, I on the DOE side will involve, whatever program office has that other responsibility, reactor development or fuels or whatever it is. So I would say if it's primarily tool development, I would propose it here, and validation to some degree is great. If it is more about application of tools and you're more in the project is more about the application of tools to an area and the experimentation to demonstrate that, then it probably belongs in one of the other topic areas.
Okay. Another question for M&S1 regarding ongoing work related to this work scope. Could you please provide more details on the effort on uranium oxide fuel fragmentation, dislocation, and dispersion, since any specific effort is not listed on your slide?
Not in a short enough time frame to do it here. That is something that I would suggest you reach out to me directly. There are so many activities between the SIDAC effort on fission gas transport that I mentioned has something to do with that. There's a major effort within the program on that topic. We're doing things with the fuel cycle program, the ATF program within NE's fuel cycle. We're doing things with EPRI. It's really too much to list, but I can put folks in contact with one or two folks who can help give them a bit more of that breadth.
Understood. Thanks, Dave. Moving into some questions for work scope M&S2. Does this call encourage the development of the verification and validation uncertainty quantification process for high fidelity systems, or is it more about the application of VVUQ for advanced materials, such as accident tolerant fuel?
Yeah, so I would say it's more the former than the latter, because again, kind of like the answer to the question before, if it's more about specific application, I think it will belong more in the topic area related to that application. Whereas if it's more about method or tool development, it would belong here. I think that's the most succinct way to answer that.
Okay. Another question for M&S2. Should the software verification and validation works in the IEEE community be considered relevant? Should the proposed methodology be consistent with, for example, IEEE standards on verification and validation?
I think it's up to the applicant what they, I think that would be part of your rationale for why the approach that you're taking is so important or beneficial, if it has that broader applicability. But we've not put any requirements within this work scope.
Does M&S2 include methodology development?
As written, it can. I would be very similar to my discussion of that area and what is more useful and less useful. I would be very clear about a specific demonstrable outcome of the proposed work, and actually helping to move that area forward and make modeling and simulation tools more useful to the end user. I think if it's more along the lines of sciencey math kind of stuff, it's I think it's still allowed under this, but that kind of takes away from the urgency and the importance of the application and the gap that it fills. So just the scope says what it says. Trying to think of the right words, but just demonstrate in your application why it's important to do this work and the gap that it fills.
Okay, Dave, a follow-on to that question. What about extension of methodology development, considering artificial intelligence, machine learning applications in NE?
Yeah, it's tough. Whether that should fit here or in the AI and machine learning subtopic under RDO or IC. But I would say if it's specifically aimed at VMV or UQ, this is probably the better place, and it would be considered in my opinion. But I would again make clear why it applies to this subtopic as written, which again could change, but however it ends up being final, just speak to why it fits in this area, and I think would be considered. I see no reason it wouldn't.
Okay. In MNS 2, to demonstrate the proposed VNV UQ methodology, is it preferred that we apply it to a new software, one that has not been verified or validated? Or is it okay to apply the methodology to an existing verified and validated software, but the application domain is outside the existing validated domain?
Yeah, it's a fair question, and it kind of reminds me. I'll probably sound like a broken record, but I need to differentiate between what the NE modeling and simulation program, the NEAMS program, is doing, and what would be useful to the NEAMS program versus what this scope is. And I've heard the word encouraged several times, and I'm trying to restrain myself from the standpoint of the NEAMS program manager, right? Yes, from the NEAMS perspective, I would love to see things that build on the tools that we've already developed or others have developed and are validated. But that's not a requirement under this call. Again, it's broader than that, and as long as the applicant demonstrates the gap that they're filling and how the proposed work will move the ball forward, will produce something that's useful to the broader community. I think it's fair game under this area, and I'm not truly identifying under the scope area encouraged or discouraged work, so long as it doesn't overlap or conflict with other things that have already been done.
Great, thanks, Dave. Can experimental work be included in MNS 2?
Yes, similar to the answer on the other question. If it's work aimed at this topic area and it has whatever level of experimentation in it, I think that's fine. Just speak to why this is aimed at development of tools and methods in this area, as opposed to the validation or the uncertainty quantification on a particular system, which would belong probably more under the RDO topics or fuels or something like that.
Okay. The next question says, scaling is the most challenging aspect of V&V UQ. Does M&S2 welcome proposals focusing on scaling analyses?
Oh, yes. So that's one of the two main areas that I noted would be particularly directly useful to the NEAMS program, and I know to the broader community.
If a proposed project applies artificial intelligence or machine learning techniques in a minor and supporting way, but it's not the primary focus, would it still be relevant under these scopes?
Yes.
Okay. Jumping back to M&S1 specifically, will the deep learning method assisted multi-scale methodology be supported, or will any artificial intelligence machine learning related topic be excluded from this scope?
Let me answer it in reverse. As it is written, so long as it does not duplicate other work, it's valid under here. But I would say it sounded like it wasn't quite an or statement at first, but I would say yes, that first part is of using, deep learning or other machine learning AI techniques will be just fine. I guess the one caution I would say is a lot of times AI or machine learning gets used kind of as well, the proposals read like it's a magic wand. And to those who want to use it on the back end, let's say I'm a regulator and I want to have confidence that the tool and the technique being used is accurately modeling the actual phenomenon that you say it's modeling. That can be a bit concerning if it's being used too broadly. But if it's clear that the physics are being preserved and the machine learning technique is speeding the operation of the code, for instance, like a closure relationship or something like that, that's pretty straightforward. Anyone can look at that and say, okay, the physics are being preserved. This is just speeding the code. I think if those kind of techniques are being used too broadly and become too much of a black box, that creates a problem for, can you demonstrate that it's really modeling the phenomena? But with that caution, I would say yes, it's applicable here.
Thank you. Is there a website you could point to for the NEUP and SBIR awards on automated meshing?
The NEUP, last year there was a NEUP project awarded, and I can find the project number later, but you can go and look at on the NEUP page under R&D, under NEAMS or Advanced Modeling and Simulation. I can't remember how it's labeled. From 2021, there's a project awarded and there's an abstract there. On SBIR, there are several projects over 2 to 4 years, and they're individual. So, please send me an email and I'll give you a list of them. I assume my email is available, but it's david.henderson@nuclear.energy.gov.
Thank you, Dave. And I'll also point out that Julie has posted the NEUP website for for access to some of the information on the NEOP awards that might be relevant. And then it looks like this is the last work scope specific question, Dave. Is two-phase flow reactor safety analysis appropriate for these work scopes?
I think that definitely falls within the MNS-1 subtopic. So yes, the one caution, similar to some of the other things, is two-phase flow, depending on the specific work scope, can become it's interesting work. It's definitely a problem that if you could solve well and demonstrate that we could model two-phase flow, particularly water boiling, that would be great. However, it's a high risk kind of area in that it's often difficult to tell if the work being proposed is going to have an outcome, as opposed to just be 3 years of interesting work. That is an area, again, it's allowed under this topic, but I would be very clear as to what the work scope is, what the metrics for success and any off ramps would be, so it's clear. Are you, as you're executing the project, how will you know whether this is heading toward an outcome that will be useful or not?
Thank you for the presentation, Dave, and thank you for all your answers to these questions that have come in. The last question I have is more appropriate for Drew, as it's very general. And the question is about the possibility of submitting the same proposal to multiple work scopes. So in the example given, they're asking about submitting the same proposal to SN1, which is a strategic needs work scope in thermal hydraulics and heat transfer, and MNS1, which is the multi-scale modeling work scope.
Thanks, Hannah. This is Drew Thomas. If you didn't have a chance to catch the CINR overview on Tuesday, it will be posted on nup.gov, and I'd encourage you to look through that presentation and listen to the questions that were answered there. The short answer is no, the same proposal cannot be submitted to to two different work scope areas. You need to choose the best work scope area, in your opinion, to submit your application to. You can submit for example, two thermal fluids proposals. They just have to be materially different, meaning that you'll compete each individual proposal in one work scope area. If there's any additional questions in regard to those requirements or others, please do reach out to the NEUP integration office at nup@inl.gov.
Hey, Drew, could I interject? This is Dave again. So long as you agree, I would say if the proposal has to do with development of thermal hydraulic modeling methods and tools, capabilities, I think it belongs in this area. And so if you disagree, that's fine, but I would propose it here. I think there's lots of interesting work to do in this technical area.
Yep. Yeah, and it's really, and that's a good point, Dave. It's really a judgment call about, the strategic needs is a more blue sky style scope area, may have a little bit different flavor. So it's a personal judgment call from the principal investigator, but that's a great point, Dave. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's all we have for this topic area. So thank you very much, Dave, for your presentation and the question and answer session.